Hello, welcome to another edition of Let the Quran Speak. I'm your host, Shabir Ali. Peace be with you and the mercy and blessings of God. In this edition of Let the Quran Speak, I will be discussing Shiai Islam. Many of you have requested by email that we should have one such program, and here it is. Now, we have in the last program condemned the present war on Iraq, and of course the occasion calls for a little bit more of that. But to reflect on something I have said in the past, when there is war, people hardly pay attention to what they really need to learn. And of course, we need to understand more about Islam. And I do not want this war to be a total distraction away from understanding what Islam is all about. Our discussion of Shiai Islam, however, is relevant to the present situation insofar as we learn that in Iraq, the majority of Muslims are of the Shiai persuasion. So we should try to understand something about what motivates Shiai Islam. Let's understand something about that. Now, in describing that, I should first make it clear that I am part of the mainstream Sunni Islam. I am not a Shiai, and hence what I have to present would be presented with some degree of bias to which I must be alert and which I must bring down to a minimum. To ensure my fair presentation of Shiai Islam, I will rely very heavily on a book entitled An Introduction to Shiai Islam by Mujan Momin, a very hefty volume consisting of some 400 pages. Very detailed information contained in this book. I will rely on this. Second, I should mention that my motivation in presenting this program is to encourage tolerance and mutual understanding. The purpose of this program is to build understanding and to build bridges between communities, to make friends and not to create enemies, to bring people together and not to separate them by building dividing walls between sects and groups. So my attitude here and my presentation is not sectarian, but rather for the purpose of promoting understanding. Now, the idea of promoting understanding between groups to keep Islam as a whole and not to divide it is found in more than one places in the Quran. I would like to begin now by offering one such passage from the Quran, and then we will proceed on with the description. Here it is, Surah 23. I will begin with verse number 52. I'll read to you first the Arabic text, and then we will look at the English translation. وَإِنَّ هَذِهِ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً وَأَنَا رَبُّكُمْ فَاتَّقُونَ فَتَقَطَّعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ زُبُرًا كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ فَذَرْهُمْ فِي غَمْرَتِهِمْ حَتَّى حِينٍ أَيَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّمَا نُمِدُّهُمْ بِهِ مِنْ مَالٍ وَبَنِينَ نُسَارِعُ لَهُمْ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ بَلْ لَا يَشْعُرُونَ. Let me stop there. That is in Surah 23, starting with verse number 52, which in the English translation reads, "This nation of yours forms one community, while I am your Lord, so heed me. Yet they carve up their business into cartels among themselves, each faction happy with whatever lies before them. Leave them in their excitement for a while. Do they reckon that we have only afforded them wealth and children because of it?" Now, this passage has, of course, its own thrust, its own purpose, its own directed audience, and its aim here is to condemn those people who have broken up the religion of God into many different religions and sects. Within the context here, we are dealing with God's message that he had sent through all of his prophets, including Moses and Jesus. The Quran is insisting here that the religion of God is only one. Now, indirectly, we may apply that to the religion of Islam in particular, to say that people have carved up the religion of Islam into many groups and sects. This, of course, is not the intention behind the message. The intention is that, as it says here, you are one community, you have one God. God is your Lord, you altogether are one community. And yet, what do people do instead? Verse number 53 says, they carve up their business into cartels among themselves. فَتَقَطَّعُوا أَمْرَهُمْ بَيْنَهُمْ زُبُرًا. They have divided up their matter among themselves into groups. كُلُّ حِزْبٍ بِمَا لَدَيْهِمْ فَرِحُونَ. Each group is just simply pleased with what it itself has. So the next verse says, well, just leave them in their deception, in their excitement for a while. Do they think that they have been given wealth and children because of this? They think that because they have divided up into groups, and each group becoming stronger, that they are doing well by such division, and of course the warning that follows from that. Well, the warning for us today, folks, does not need to come directly out of the Quranic text. It is coming to us through the events that we're witnessing in the world. With the division among Muslims, Muslims, of course, have become powerless to become a major force in world politics and in shaping the world towards the betterment infused by the divine wisdom of the Quranic revelation. But enough said about that then. Let me then, with this brief introduction, go into some description of what is Shiai Islam, hoping that this would help us to understand some of the dynamics in present-day Baghdad and in the rest of Iraq, so that we can understand the relationship between Sunni and Shia, and so that we can work towards the harmonization of these two large religious groups. So let me take a short break, and I will come back and we will look at Shiism as described in an introduction to Shiai Islam by Mujan Momin. Hi, welcome back to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Shabir Ali. Now, we're looking at the division between Shiai and Sunni Islam, not to keep them as divisions, but in a hope to bring them together in a single whole. Of all of the people who call themselves Muslims worldwide, about 1.2 billion people in the world's population, some 80% of that is what makes up the mainstream of Islam, or the Sunni population. Another 10% makes up the Shia, and then another 5% rounds it off to 100, containing all of the remaining splinter groups. So Shiism is a small part of the large stream of Islam, just 10% of the whole, but nevertheless 10% of a billion is 1 million, and that makes up a large, a sizable population, a major world force. We should try to understand something about this. Many Sunnis have not bothered to pay any attention to learn anything about Shia Islam, because when you're in the mainstream, you need to know very little, it seems, about the insignificant groups. However, it is the insignificant groups that learn a lot about the major groups to which they which they see as some sort of a challenge to their own existence. And hence, one who is a Sunni should learn something about Shiism in order to facilitate discussion and to promote better understanding and harmony. In the world scene today, Sunnis are trying to get a better understanding of Shiism, and there has been moves towards harmonization of the groups. So when I attended a conference of Muslim scholars in Mecca not too long ago, one of the major speakers there was a representative from Shiai Islam, and he was greeted, welcomed, and given as much of standing within the platform of speakers as were the other speakers. Here in the Toronto area, Imams are getting together, both Sunni and Shia, to work together towards the solution of problems which are commonly faced by both the Sunni and the Shiite population. So there is much work ahead, and that work needs to be built upon understanding, which I hope to promote beginning with this show. Now, I want to start with things which are very common or which are similar between Sunni and Shia, and we will notice the areas of divergence. Now, both Sunni and Shiism is based on the Quran and on the sunnah, which is contained in the hadith, that is in the reports about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. However, we should right away notice a couple of small differences. One is that when it comes to the Quran, then now all Muslims, Sunnis and Shia, agree that the Quran as we have it now is as was left by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and collected under the caliphate of the third caliph, that is Uthman. However, sentiment for Ali and support for the idea that he should have been the first ruler, an idea which survived in Shiai Islam, lent itself to the promotion of the idea that there must have been verses in the Quran which had designated Ali as the rightful owner, or at least spoken of him in terms which would be compatible with his being one of the most important figures, or the most important figure after the Prophet Muhammad. And obviously such verses do not exist in the Quran, and the idea arose that such verses must have been in the Quran at one time, but must have been removed by Sunnis who do not support this claim. However, modern scholarship has laid to rest that idea, that supposition that the Quran has been changed in any way, and hence both Sunnis and Shias maintain that the Quran as we have it now is as was left by the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and compiled during the caliphate of the third caliph. When it comes to the hadith or the following of the Prophet's sunnah, as noted in reports about him, the two communities, Shias and Sunnis, have tended to keep both or each their separate record of what the Prophet said and did. Hence, for Sunnis, reliance is placed upon certain noted collections of traditions made in the third century of Islam. Most notable among these are Bukhari and Muslim, and then comes Abu Dawud and Tirmidhi, Ibn Majah and Nasai. But in the Shiite tradition, emphasis has been placed not only on what the Prophet Muhammad said and did, but also on what the Imams after him within the Shiite tradition said and did. And so separate compilations were made such that even when it came to reliance on what the Prophet said, that was only taken as valid or relied more so on if it came through the line of descent through the Imams. I know this sounds a little bit complicated. Let me simplify that. So we have a report that the Prophet Muhammad said something, and that report might be passed on orally or in writing or both from one individual to another until it is recorded in one of the classical textbooks, let's say in Bukhari or Muslim. Well, such a report would be given greater validity in Shiite circles if that report had been transmitted through the Shiite Imams as opposed to any other individual whose origin and sagacity might for them be of doubtful origin. So we have already introduced here that Shias follow not only the Prophet Muhammad, but certain designated individuals known as Imams. And that we will come to see is one of the major differences between Sunni and Shiai. So we'll come to understand a little bit more about that. Now, when we talk about the fundamental elements of the religion, again, here we see that there is a great degree of similarity, and that shows that Shiism and Sunnism at the heart are really compatible, and they do not need to be divided as much as people have imagined over time. Small divisions have been greatly exaggerated on both sides until the two communities have become two separate and irresolvable communities, or their differences have become irresolvable. Though, in fact, when we get to the heart of the matter, we realize the proximity of the two faiths. The first major tenet of Shiite belief is Tawheed, or the divine unity, the oneness of God, and that is something that is common with Sunni Islam. The second is Nubuwah, or prophethood, and that is something in which Muslims also believe from within Sunni Islam. And the third major concept is the Ma'ad, or the resurrection. Again, this gels with what Muslims believe. In fact, the Sunni belief is noted often as either 7 items or 6 items, and all of those 7 or 6 can be combined under 3 major categories. 1 is Tawheed, or the divine unity. 2 is Nubuwwah, or prophethood, or communication of Risala from God. And 3rd is the life after death. So these are the first 3 items we note here that are, of course, at the core of Shiai belief. Where Shiism departs, though, is in the Imamate, or recognizing that there is a line of Imams or leaders that follow after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who are infallible, guides towards God's will and intention for people. Now, to be sure, Sunnis also have Imams. We hear about the Imams of the 4 Sunni schools, for example. But the Imams in the Sunni schools are not thought to be infallible. In fact, often their mistakes are pointed out by Sunnis themselves. Those are said to be Imams only in the sense that their learning, their piety, their ability to guide others have been demonstrated over time, and they have been taken by large segments of the Muslim population as leaders and guides to understand the details of the Islamic law, and hence they have been given the designation Imam, but they have not been taken as infallible, nor has it been considered that any one of them has to be universally followed. Whereas, in fact, on the other hand, the 4th doctrine in Shia Islam here is the idea of Imamate, the idea that there is a certain succession of rulers after the Prophet Muhammad, each of them being divinely appointed by God, each of them being infallible, and each of them being required to be followed, or, as I should say that another way, that Muslims, all and sundry, are required to follow these Imams. And if they do not, then in fact they die as though they were dying in the period of ignorance when Islam's light had not yet shone. The 5th point, however, is a point again on which all Muslims will agree, that is the idea of adl, or divine justice. However, this divine justice came to be explained 2 different ways, one in Sunni Islam and the other in Shiai Islam. We do not need to dwell on the differences in the way that is explained, for that will take us into a very long discussion and an unnecessary one. On the whole, the question arose in Islamic history as to how do we explain God's justice when we assert human freedom, and how does the power of God relate to the free will of human individuals to make moral choices? And that came to be explained differently between 2 major groups, the Asharis and the Mu'tazilis, and the Sunnism took the Ashari explanation, and Shias took the Mu'tazili explanation. But at the heart of it, when these explanations are put side by side, we realize we're dealing with a very complex problem, and the solutions for it are not as varied as they may first appear. In fact, many modern Sunnis, in fact, have gravitated close towards the Mu'tazili explanation about the justice, the power, and the knowledge of God, thus, in fact, bringing the Shia and Sunni Muslims in close proximity on this point as well. And so that covers the major doctrines of Shiism, and as you can see, when we consider the major doctrines of Shiism, they are very close to the major doctrines in Sunnism, and hence we have here 2 compatible faiths, separated mainly because of the Shiai doctrine of the Imama, or that line of Imams who necessarily must be followed, and who obviously are not followed as Imams within Sunni circles, although Sunnis recognize some of the Shia Imams as very great scholars and pious men of history. And in fact, we recognize Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, who is said to be the 6th Imam among Shias, as the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifa, who is recognized as one of the leaders of one of the 4 most major schools of following within Sunni Islam. So there are cross currents and interactions and connections, much more than we have time to explore in this short program. But I'm going to take a break, and we'll come back and we'll try to explore a little bit more of that similarity and understand the differences between Shia and Sunni Islam. Hello, welcome back to Let the Quran Speak. I'm Shabir Ali. Now, we're exploring the difference between Sunni and Shiai Islam to see if, in fact, these are compatible faiths. Now, Iraq is much in the news, and we learned that the majority population of Iraq, a slight majority, is of the Shiai persuasion within Islam. We want to understand what is Shiism, especially in response to many of your emails that requested such an exposition. To ensure my balanced presentation, I'm relying heavily on a book entitled An Introduction to Shiai Islam by Mujan Momin. Now, in this book, it is explained that after the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, died, there was some lack of clarity as to who should take over the political rule after him. Now, we realize that not only was the Prophet Muhammad a prophet preaching apocalyptic ends, but he was also a temporal leader, guiding the community through its politics, its international affairs, and its social and economic conditions and all of that. So who should take over from him as a political ruler? This was not something clear from the start, but after his death, some of his companions decided to appoint Abu Bakr, and this gained widespread acceptance, and Abu Bakr was the undisputed first caliph, and after him, Omar, then Uthman, and fourth, Ali. Now, Ali was the cousin and also the son-in-law of the Prophet Muhammad. He had married his daughter Fatima. And from them, two sons were born, Hassan and Hussein. Now, there was initially some discontent with the way in which the decision to appoint Abu Bakr was finalized. It is said that while the family of the Prophet, meaning Ali and others, were busy trying to get the Prophet's dead body prepared and ready for burial, that decision was made in their absence, and hence they had no better option but to accept that decision. But there was some long-standing dissatisfaction remaining from the manner in which that was done, and that dissatisfaction eventually came to be exaggerated in the manner in which we see sometimes being discussed within Shia Islam, to the extent that it was thought that Ali should in fact have been the first caliph. Not only that, but that he was divinely appointed by God, who through the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and hence that all Muslims should have accepted him as the first caliph and the temporal ruler. Now, many have come around to accept that the course of events is as it should have been, Abu Bakr, Omar, Uthman, and then Ali as the fourth caliph, but nevertheless, the idea that Ali was to be the first caliph was later on exaggerated to the extent that he was thought to be an infallible imam. So whereas Sunnis accept the other caliphs as temporal guides who may make mistakes on the human level, being humans as they are, it is taught within Shia Islam that Ali, being fit for the first Imam's position, was an infallible guide, and that he is then to appoint the second Imam after he receives this divine appointment from God himself. And so that a succession of Imams who are each infallible would follow, and then that led up to a continuation of up to 12 Imams within the group known as the 12er Shiites, or the Ithna Ashari, being the majority population of Iran, and as we see now in the show, also of Iraq. But there have never been continuous and universal agreement over who exactly should be one Imam after another, and Imams tended to succeed one after another by heredity, so that the eldest son of the previous Imam usually gets appointed to be the next Imam. But history was not so always smooth. So after the death of the sixth Imam, for example, Imam Jafar as-Sadiq, there was some puzzle as to who should be the seventh Imam. The Ismailis took Ismail, the son of Jafar as-Sadiq, to continue the line of succession through him, and so they became Ismailis, whereas on the other hand, the 12er Shiites continued the line of succession through Musa al-Kazim as the seventh Imam, and eventually that will lead to a total of 12 Imams. Now, the 12th Imam presented some bit of a puzzle as well. After the death of the 11th Imam, Hassan al-Askari, it was thought that perhaps he had a son who was only 5 years old at the time of his death, and who went into occultation, or who became hidden. and now he is in a great occultation such that no one is able to contact him, but that he is still alive, being alive for the past 1,000 years, and he will continue to be alive until God causes him to return as the Mahdi. When he returns as the Mahdi, or the guided one, he will also he will bring back, or through his coming will be brought back also a resurrection of previous figures. So Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet, other figures will be resurrected. Even the enemies of this Mahdi will be resurrected. They will engage in a cosmic battle. Jesus will also come back, and that will bring about the end of time. So it is a very complex theology that came to develop as a result of the initial dissatisfaction with the way in which Abu Bakr was first appointed to be caliph. Now, modern historians looking back at this do not take very seriously the claim that this Imam has been in occultation and has been in hiding and still remains alive over this 1,000 years. But of course, that is a matter of belief, and one who holds that belief does not require that to be verified or sanctified or confirmed by science. And nevertheless, it is a belief that many have found very difficult to maintain. It is a particularly Shiai belief, and it is something that separates Shiism from Sunni Islam. Now, folks, there's so much to deal with. We need to condemn this war a little bit more, but we don't have time to do that now. We need to look at some of your responses, but that too will have to remain for the next program. I would encourage you to support this program so it continues to be aired. Send your check, your money order, your donation to the Islamic Information Center, 1168 Bloor Street West, Toronto, M6H1N1.
Allah